Are we on homeless? But if I how much time do I have?
Actually,
I went over.
ran out. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else tonight for public comment? Yes.
Hi, folks. My name is Irene. I'm a local community organizer, and I'm just here to talk to you about how the ongoing conflicts that have been happening in Growing Hope Marketplace are a clear sign that an open, non-commodified space to gather is deeply necessary in the community right now. And this building, we find ourselves the capacity to meet that need. We need that need met, and there is power that need met, and there is power here to allow it to happen. Now I would say that, like staff of Avalon might not have, as Raven mentioned, the capacity to deal with staffing and open gathering space, but there are community organizers who need a space and would love to lend their capacity and would love to, and have in the past organized for years this kind of work, and are currently organizing in the Warming Center. So it needs to happen. There's a space to happen. And as Amber mentioned, there is more than enough resources being given from the community to substantiate such a need being met. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience that would like to make public comment tonight? Okay. Anyone on Zoom?
Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to make public comment? Please raise your hand. Are you able to hear us online now? Great, thank you. There's not anybody,
No.
sorry.
Okay. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which would be approval of the minutes from the last meeting. So those are attached to the packet as well. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the August 9th meeting?
I make a move or a motion to approve the agenda or the minutes from last meeting.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The next item is the discussion. So there was some in the communication that Katie sent, some of the things on the list that was compiled of items that were discussed at previous meetings. Just to give everyone a synopsis of kind of what's been brought up thus far. But feel free to add to that or continue with that.
Yeah, can I propose, I think that's important, given like, this is essentially our penultimate meeting. And we need to be able to provide something to the city attorney to put pen to paper. So I think it's important that we really list out the items. I think though, at our very first meeting, certain members expressed some concerns about the numbers and figures and, the math. And I know that Avalon sent along in the intervening time some documentation with respect to that. So maybe I would propose that we discuss that for now, or just to start, just so that I'm not a mathematical person, so I need as much assistance as possible. So
Before we go into the financial stuff.
Mhm.
I was wondering if we could let everyone here know what is proposed so far, since that email was only sent to us members, and there's a lot of public people here probably really interested. If
Yeah.
I have it up, if
Wanna
you
Go ahead and go. through-
Okay, yeah, cool. All right. So there's some historic sheds in the back of the building. The historic district does not want them torn down, but rather refurbished into something we suggested a community tool shed, facilities provided by Avalon Housing potentially as a benefit, with the sharing access as well, facilitated by them or another community member. Bike storage racks potentially in another tool shed or a shed. And then additionally, using the community center space to have pop-ins for other service providers and also public access. That was something that we had been talking about since the beginning of the meeting. And I know that there was some issues with uncomfortability surrounding around public use of the restrooms and center. So hopefully we can engage in more dialogue about that, since we've had some great public comments. And then gardens, but there's not really anywhere for garden space other than like raised garden beds potentially, or partnering with another property that can do an external garden, and energy efficiency and noise mitigation. So those are the things that we had gone over. So everyone is on the same page.
Great. And so then are we hoping that, just that Michael can kind of go over the
Yeah,
documents?
just, I mean,
What do you
especially.
guys Look at, what are you looking, Josh?
Yeah, no, especially in light of the concerns over the pilot that have been raised by the public. I think it's important that we go over the the facts and figures again, which is something we did way, way back at the very beginning. And since we have a revised spreadsheet, more or less, it might be helpful.
Right. So there were two documents and I'm looking for a little guidance on what level of detail and how much time you want to spend. One of them summarized the funds we're bringing in order to build, summarize the costs to build, and then in terms of questions that had been raised, went over how those different sources regulated us going forward. Both in terms of how long they were in place, and in terms of how they watched, how we had to report back to them. So you all have seen it, these folks haven't. But I guess I'm sort of assuming I'm talking to you all. That's a lot, so I just want to acknowledge that. I don't know how to undo that. Do you want me to go through that, or do you want to ask questions about it? What's your preference? Because as I said, the main part of the first of what's the development costs, development sources, and then at the bottom it says compliance for subsidy sources, was to one, give you a sense of where we get our money from, how we spend it, and then how those funds regulate what we do. I'm gonna pause, because if I just plunge in it, it'll be 8 o'clock.
Sure.
Doesn't strike me as what you all want.
Yeah, I know that Jason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you're the number guy.
Oh, sure, thanks. I just got, it's just ones and zeros. It's not all the rest. No, so with all these sources of funds that you're getting, are they, you said they're either grants or they're gonna be loans where you're not expected to pay them back, right?
We're not expected to pay them back out of the operations of the property. What I sort of indicated at the bottom is most of those public loans, and now I'm gonna mention ones that are on the sheet you're looking to, and I apologize. If you look at like the second one down there where it says Mishta and then Home ARP 4.1 million and some others, we actually do have to, we will owe that at the end of 50 years. And it's accruing 1% interest. So 50 years out, we would owe Mishta, I think it's $5 or $6 million because it's accruing interest.
Yeah.
So they don't make us charge rents high enough to pay back that loan. But what they effectively do from a public policy point of view is we owe them that debt. So it is a disincentive for us to do something else with the property down the line. Because what we found is when we reach the end of these compliance periods, if we continue with affordability, they typically roll over that debt or forgive it. But if we were to try to sell the property or raise the rents to market, they would make us pay back that money. And that's true for the Mishta home. That's also true for the county home. Both of those are due, but we're not paying on them each month. So tenants don't have to help us pay it back. We would if we ever tried to sell the property.
Well, yeah, you said that you didn't repay it with operations, so that means,
No, we're not going
Wouldn't.
to. We're not paying.
correct. Okay, well, that's good. That helps keep it to seem like you're gonna stay with that. But yeah, when I looked at the numbers, it looks like you're paying about $145,000 in taxes for 20 years, and like extrapolate that over 50 years, that's only about 400 to 500,000. When I compared that to the apartment building, the Tower Apartments, that's valued at 533, and you guys say yours is at 1.3 million. And the way their taxes pan out, it looks like over the 50 years, you guys should be paying about $8.8 million in taxes. So that averages out to $177,000 a year. And then if you look at it, like how we previously talked about how the AMI is based off of the county, and the county is twice as high as ours. So 50 to 60% is actually 100 to 120% of our median income. So only 8 of those are actually going to people that make less, that make 60% of the median income. So even at that, for those 8 people, that's $22,000 a year that the city is paying. So like those are the things that we should be getting back in kind. And yeah, even if the community center, like you don't want to put in a separate entryway outside of the community center and those restrooms to where the tenants would have access to, or a separate entryway for them so they don't have to go through there or what have you. I don't know why, but there's a couple parks that have facilities and they're not open. Like there's restrooms there that could, because one of the things that you're supposed to do is help out in the parks, or one of those, I think, is tier 1A. So that would be another suggestion. And yeah, we should definitely have a open space. Like they said, there are community organizers that can help do good work, and all they need is space. And that's something that we can absolutely do with, if we're getting the same value of what you're getting out of the city, I think.
Just I might have misheard you, so I just want to make sure that I'm clarifying that 100% of the units are for folks at or below 60% of area median income.
And that's for the county, and for the city, that's 120% of the area median income.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure I didn't know if you were stating it was less than 100. I just wanted to make sure it's clear with all the units. Okay, thanks.
So yeah, like the way I see it is, yeah, only 8 of those products are really going to help people. And like, if we're trying to help the people that need affordable housing at the bottom of the bottom, it could go lower. But
9 are further committed to folks at 50% or below, and 5 are committed to those at 40% and below, just so you know.
okay,
Further
that's-
targeting is there.
okay, that's
Yeah,
different than what.
Can I just ask clarifying question? I'm trying to find in one of the various emails explaining the breakdown. What was the rent gonna be? There was a flat figure
Yeah,
that you. had said.
750 is.
750, okay.
So another way of looking at those numbers, although I took it from the city's memo in terms of the value of the pilot, and I don't know if you and the city are on the same page, so.
I just did my own back of the.
I know, so I'm not, I don't even know.
I'm not a CPA.
I wasn't trying to compare them. But the city's valuation of the pilot over those 50 years works out to the equivalent of $180 per unit per month. $180 per unit per month.
Okay,
So, 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 so,
Wait, what do you mean, $180 per unit per month? So 20.
That's how much the
So
tax.
that's how we get to
break
the
we're-
6,000 or,
No, the tax break we're getting
oh, okay.
is the equivalent of $180 per unit per month. And I'm gonna.
4,000
Thank you.
Yeah, if you do.
per month, yes.
How
right,
much,
Yeah.
Hayden?
It was about 3,960 per month.
I don't know if it reconciles with yours because you started,
Hmm.
I don't know what their taxable assessment assumption was versus yours, which would.
I find it.
Big difference in what you would get. And so I guess what I think part of our consideration has been, are we reducing our rents by an amount that reflects that deep of a subsidy? We think the 750, which is, as we talked about early, is well below the maximum we could charge for those units according to our funders, was our attempt to address what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Lowering our rents so that they are meaningfully below rents that are available in Ipsy. And I'm not saying you're going to agree with that, but I just want you to understand that we were thinking about that. We do understand the value of this. I will just say as an aside, it's absolutely true. 50 years is unusual. It's only 50 years because Mishta required us to do it for 50 years. Because that's how long their mortgage is. If Mishta had a 20-year mortgage, we'd be asking for a 20-year pilot. And if we change if this isn't clear to folks, if we change the use halfway through, we lose the pilot and we have to start negotiating over again. It's not, we don't get it unless we continue to do what we've promised to do, which is a bit of an aside. So, so that partially spoke to your point about the value of that subsidy.
I know that I can't do math, but my computer has a calculator. So with that 3,960 per month, if you multiply that times 12, then by 50,
Mhm.
right? You get 2.3
Mhm.
million-ish. So,
Okay, still, nevertheless.
I mean, it's not insubstantial as, yeah, so.
I personally am not a numbers person at all. I was accredited in math for some reason. I don't know how that happened, but my wife can attest to that. I am really appreciative for Jason's skill set in that area because I feel like that what's unique about these things is that every one of us has a different skill set, lived experience, knowledge of what we can bring to the table in this process. And where I lack some certain skills, I lean on the others to hopefully help out with that. And one thing that I don't lack though is work experience in this field, working with individuals who are at higher risk of incarceration because of the drastic historical components that prevail that. And so I just kind of wanted to uplift that since there is, I appreciate you doing the math, 3,960 potential tax break money a month. I know that one of the issues was like worrying about how to be able to sustain a community tool shed over the years. So I'm wondering if there's a way we could use some tax break money to go towards a benefit potentially. And I also just really want to uplift what so many community members have also just said in the public comment. There is a really big issue going on and growing with the Growing Hope situation. And yesterday at the city council meeting, there were some folks who had a couple different narratives of what was really going on. Some thinking that housing is the root of all the issues and some thinking that drug markets are the root of all the issues. But regardless of the matter is that we all can agree that there needs to be a space. And one thing that I really appreciate is that Avalon housing on their values, it talks about community in the sense of building community and having community and building that out and including people who have been unhoused for however many years into the house community and building people together and bridging these gaps. And so I feel like this is a really pivotal moment where that value could really be shown. in Ipsy particularly. I know that the building has to be demolished and then rebuilt, so it's not an overnight situation, but I do think that having a community space, like I just really would like to see that as a benefit, a community space for people to go to get services, because an Ipsy thrift store commenter yesterday at the city council meeting mentioned that people go in and request $3 shirts and $3 pants, and that they just want it for free, and they can't do that. That's not their model. And $3 is a lot to someone who has no dollars, first of all. And second of all, one of the things that she mentioned was that you need a referral from the social worker to get the vouchers. And so there's this kind of like conundrum of like, I'm too this to qualify for this, but I'm too much of that to qualify for that. And it feels not good. And I just want to uplift the fact that having a community center where community organizations and organizers can pop in and provide services, that could be a referral to the next program that that person needs. That can be the step in that right direction for that person. And so I really want to focus on ensuring that we talk through that particular benefit, since there are quite a few community members here in the public, especially given what's going on with Growing Hope and the narratives that are being painted around our unhoused community. And Avalon is a housing first nonprofit, so I thought it would make sense too.
I want to respond to that with a question.
Please do.
Well, that moves us off numbers, which is fine by me.
And that's also
If-
fine by me. I just wanted to.
If you got them, you looked at them and you don't have any questions,
I always
done
have
with it.
questions. Yeah.
no, we can be done with them, but I want to make sure that if we turn to sort of the benefits and use, we don't, at the end, someone say, well, why didn't we go through the documents that were presented? So that's my quick pause.
Yeah.
I do have a quick question.
Go ahead.
If someone were to go above the income thresholds, so 40, 50, 60%, do you lose the pilot for that unit and have to pay?
Mm.
That is actually up to the city of Ypsilanti and how they want it implemented.
So could that be something that is written into the
For sure.
deed restriction, whatever recommendations we make to city council?
You're asking me, I mean, you could put it in there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it would have to go, I can't answer the specifics of that question right now.
Yeah.
'Cause it goes
Um,
to council, right? Like.
But it would have to go,
Approves it.
yeah, to see through the city attorney and what can be actually done with the language and then go to council. Yes, correct.
And given that fact, I'm answering based on my experience in Ann Arbor. If the FC city attorney says something different, I am deferring to the FC city attorney here. But my understanding is that a pilot is sort of a unit by unit, year by year. Did you provide the benefit? Then you get the benefit. If we provide the benefit to the right people, then we get the benefit of the pilot. So yes.
Okay, so we could contemplate something like if somebody goes above 60 or 80% AMI, Avalon would lose the benefit of the pilot for that year. Let's just,
Well,
for
that-
the years that they're
I would-
over,
I would hope you would say for that unit, for that year.
Please.
for that unit,
But-
yes, for that
but
unit.
I understand your intent.
Yes.
I personally, once again, I am not a very knowledgeable person when it comes to like finances, and would want to do a lot more research into what that could look like to ensure that there are protections for people, so they're not saying, oh, this person's going to be over 60%. I don't want them in my unit because I'm not going to get the tax write-off benefit. Is there a way, is that what you're?
It could be similarly drafted into the deed or the document by which I don't know, I think it can happen in the deed. I've seen them in deed. So you target 30, 40, 50% of the area median income. People who are over, I'm making these numbers up because I can't retain numbers in my head. But then for people who go above, or units that go above 40 or 50 or 60 or 80% of the area median income, the developer loses the pilot for that unit for that year. There could be other things like, and I'm saying this, I'm not saying that we have to do this,
Throw
right?
noodles out the
but
wall.
we encourage them to move to another unit. They get encouraged to move to another unit that isn't subsidized, so someone who really needs it can move in. I'm just saying, I've seen it. I'm not-
Yeah, no, I like. When talking to people, they say sometimes rent control protects people that are already there and that it's just a tenured thing. And I get that, but it makes me feel icky trying to compel a landlord to compel someone to move out.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
can I ask, because I remember at our last meeting, we had kind of or maybe it was the meeting before, we had discussed the procedures by which Avalon deals with someone who, you know, by happenstance does actually pass the bracket. And I forgot what you had said, because I think we're talking about two things here. One is, do they get the tax incentive if someone does that? And then secondly, what happens to the person who that happens to? And so what could you
can
refresh my
respond,
memory?
But it's also an opportunity, what Aubrey and
Yeah.
I were just quickly,
Okay,
we're gonna take a lot of notes and have to go find out how some of the things you want to do impact the regulations that that list of funding brings with it. And so sometimes we're not responding to everything because often we don't know. We need to learn more. In general, in tax credit housing, they discourage evicting people because their incomes go up. We don't want to sort of have people have a tension between their housing and their employment, or their sources of income. Rather, what happens, and again, I'm gonna pause because we have so many different funding sources. Typically, when their income starts to exceed a certain amount, we start to increase the rent because they don't need the subsidy as much. And essentially what's happening is their rent starts to move more towards a market rent. Our pilot would go up because when we collect more rent, we pay a higher pilot because the pilot is calculated based on the rent we collect. And at some point, they're gonna move out of their own choice because essentially they're no longer getting a deal. You know, the market will offer them, we're not below market anymore, so to speak. So, and typically that's the preferred strategy as opposed to having one of these cutoffs where people say, well, if I, you know, if I take the raise, I lose my housing. We don't want that. We want to avoid that if we can. But rents typically go up at a certain point as incomes go up.
So I just realized that I may have been operating under a different assumption. So the pilot means that when I look at operating projections.
That sheet, yep.
yeah, that's a spreadsheet.
There's pilot income. I was thinking that the taxes, the property or the taxes associated with the property taxes would be $1 a year. Because I think that's what happens.
That's in Ann
elsewhere.
Arbor. Ann Arbor's
Right.
the only place. This is a more typical one. It's based on 4% of a figure that is calculated based on the previous year's rents minus the utilities we pay. It's 4% of that number.
So you get a tax break on the utilities that you pay also?
I don't,
Like
I'm
the pilot
gonna
pays
let you
4% of
characterize it.
the-
The way they calculate a pilot in Michigan
Mhm.
is they take the total amount we collect in rent and they subtract utilities that we pay. They don't subtract other operating costs, but they subtract utilities. I'll let you characterize it anyway you want.
Sure.
I'm giving you the math.
Yeah.
Our utility costs are typically higher than what you see in market rate.
Yeah. I also think the reason they do it is if you didn't do that, it would create an incentive to make tenants pay utilities.
Ah.
And so this sort of makes the utilities invisible to your pilot calculation. You're gonna pay roughly the same pilot, whether we pay utilities, which is what we do, or if, as in most rental situations, you put them on the tenant.
Aubrey, can you, or you, Michael? Can you again tell me how the units, what's the breakdown for the AMIs that you're calculating?
Sure, 100% are for folks at or below 60% of area median income. 9 are further targeted to households with incomes at or below 50% of area median income. And then 5 are further targeted to households with incomes at or below 40% of area median income.
And then 8 are going to have vouchers associated with them.
Supportive housing set aside. Yep.
Okay.
I know last meeting we discussed the potential of having a set amount of units allocated towards the jail program for Avalon Housing. I know that y'all said y'all would discuss that a little bit more and come back with some thoughts on that. So I was wondering if you had any updates on that. And I wanted to mention that last meeting there was a discussion on like the request for public restrooms in a community center would make y'all feel a little uncomfortable because of one, the tenants having their own space and need for their own space, and 2, like not wanting staff to necessarily be harassed by someone who isn't supposed to be there. And I wanted to just like acknowledge that adequate facilities, including public restrooms, they actually promote sanitation and can reduce public health risk by creating a more dignified environment for people. And so I appreciate Bree mentioning the harm reduction last meeting, and I would love to hear about any updates on that is for having harm reduction options as well here. So I didn't mean to take us off the numbers again, but I wanted to just bring us back to public use of the space as well.
I can speak quickly to the formerly incarcerated question. Is that, you can. Our initial inclination, because to do a formal set aside is going to require all those various funders to make sure that their funding works with that, is we were thinking language that had us agree to affirmatively market these units. You had mentioned seniors as well, that we could, while we can't do formal set-asides for seniors, I don't know if we can do formal set-asides for formerly incarcerated folks. I want to differentiate my confidence in that. What we can absolutely do is enter into a property management plan where our property manager will be affirmatively marketing, meaning making sure that advertisements for availabilities of units and wait lists are known in the agencies that serve seniors in the community, this other senior centers, those sorts of places. And certainly, whether it's agencies that serve those leaving incarceration, returning to the community, or at this moment, Avalon actually has some presence at the county facility. We have no problem adding that as a commitment to how we will market these units. So to make sure that folks that I think it's fair to say most landlords try to hide their units from, we will go out of our way to make sure they're aware that they're there.
As the community housing prioritization process through coordinated entry more integrated with reentry programs as well, the population that we are seeing on what's known as the chip list in terms of who's prioritized for the vouchered units is increasingly inclusive of those that are experiencing chronic homelessness and exiting incarceration.
Yeah, so we have staff on the jail reentry services team, so they're working in the jail and proactively identifying folks who are housing unstable, experiencing homelessness, reentry. And we're playing an active role in ensuring that those people are on this list, which has historically been a massive gap in the community. So our hope is that more and more these folks are going to get prioritized.
So to go off of that then, thank you. I was working in the jail when that program started, so I was very grateful to see that, because a lot of folks are sitting in jail right now because they simply have nowhere to tether to or bond out to, and it's literally a criminalization of poverty at that point. And so my question, I guess, to that is, if you're you're not able to necessarily allocate a certain amount of spots for clients who are Avalon. I'd been identified by the Avalon caseworker in the jail. Like you couldn't have 5 units. I'm just making up a number, like go towards those individuals who are in the jail needing to, who are as IPSI residents, but are unhoused, whatever, and they're needing a spot. Would those people be able to be prioritized and having those sound amount of units only for them?
There is the possibility that through the CHIP process, we could work something out with the community whereby they add another sort of layer of prioritization for the supportive housing unit set aside. As Michael mentioned, if we did that, that would have to get the approval of funders as well as the community. It's not a decision Avalon can make unilaterally. I would say there is precedent for somewhat similar kind of subcategory population of focus in our communities past. But at present, the priority populations are families experiencing homelessness, those meeting the HUD chronically homeless criteria, and veterans, as you know.
Could a prioritization also go to seniors?
Parsing the word prioritization versus set aside, I don't know. I mean, I really don't, but in general, the law pushes us away from considering age at all except for housing that is formally identified as senior housing, which we're not.
So, go ahead.
I did reach out to the Fair Housing, to Pam Kish, but I have not heard back from her. We had a quick chat and I just didn't get a response.
What it sounds like I'm hearing is that there's the possibility, even though, we can't necessarily unilaterally force Avalon to agree to it. There's essentially, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the idea of prioritization here is like, if all the units are full, one becomes available, the people who are prioritized go to the front of the line. Is that kind of the idea? Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
that's,
just very briefly, the way in which the current community prioritization process works is by using a common assessment tool that looks at people's level of need in addition to how long have they been experiencing homelessness or how many episodes of homelessness have they experienced. And it is a priority list in that someone may, for example, receive a terminal cancer diagnosis, and that is going to move them up the list, even though they may have been on it for a shorter period of time because their level of need changed. That is the current system by which we pull referrals into the supportive housing units.
Okay.
And what we're trying to do is close gaps in the system whereby we are aware that folks are not getting on that list who should be.
that's helpful. Yeah. And then I guess the second part of it, that at least I'm trying to understand is that you're permitted to at least market to certain groups. So be it, recently incarcerated, be it seniors or other, sensitive populations. Okay. So, I mean, so even though we can't necessarily say for regulatory purposes, get set aside units, we can, get in writing the idea of marketing, the idea of prioritization. Okay.
Is that also where you could add IPSI residents as well on there, just for folks who have been living in IPSI for all their lives?
It's an interesting question and I don't think so, and the reason I don't think so is IPSI is giving a significant contribution through the pilot. The money we're getting that we call the tax credit and the home dollars from the county and the state are all coming from federal budget. And the general rule is if you're taking federal money, then you're in essence taking money from everybody anywhere in this country. And it's typically not that easy to establish preferences. However, there are sometimes countywide preferences, but it's not up to us. It's rarely done at the level of a project. It's typically done by the state rules. And I've never seen them with their home dollars or with their project-based vouchers, which is how the homeless unit, the units for formerly homeless folks will get subsidized. I've never seen them allow local residents, residential priorities. It's something we can ask about.
Yeah, and
I don't think so, though.
yeah, in a similar vein, I mean, I can understand by, say, the sheer force of geography, the number of people who would be applying for these units would likely be from Ypsi, Washtenaw County, you know, just as a, like I said, through the sheer force of geography. But in your experience, how common is it for, say, your other facilities, your other locations, that people come from, say, Alaska or Arizona? I mean, I understand we're in a time where there are many climate refugees, but yeah.
And so our HMIS data actually reflects that most people who are experiencing so I don't know the exact percentage, but it's a very small percentage that aren't, and that's a common fallacy. I also just feel compelled to say it's also a philosophical decision for Avalon to make that kind of geographic limitation. And of course, I'm, you know, to quote Alberto Ruiz, like a border is a line in which a bird does not see. If we do that here, what does that mean elsewhere? And setting precedent like that feels like a huge values decision for the organization, because we have been in other communities where people are asking the same. And those are communities in which actually folks deserve to and need to be able to live there. So while I can appreciate it from a sort of economic reparation standpoint, I also want to acknowledge that there's complexity to that decision from a values perspective for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And I wanted to bring up something that's related to this as well, is the laws, the local ordinances. I was just doing some Googling and looking through the municipal codes, and I see that spitting or urinating on the street is illegal. And also trespassing is illegal. Loitering and obstructing passage is illegal. Anyone who's on a park or public space. So my question is, where do you go if you don't have a private space to go to? And as a housing first nonprofit, like, I just think it's very important to uplift that, like, most of your clients, if not majority of them, have some type of potential law enforcement contact at higher risk, incarceration history, domestic violence history, you name it. There's like a plethora of like collateral consequences that have come from this situation. And it is not just a yesterday issue. This has been historic. This has been centuries in the making. And these laws that have been put into practice are criminalizing poverty, houselessness, Blackness, like you name it. It's criminalizing things that are not white, rich, wealthy property owner. And in most countries, housing is a basic human right. And it's interesting because the livable wage calculates housing into it. So if housing is calculated into your basic needs for a livable wage, how come it's not seen as a basic right here in this country? And I want to uplift that, a way that Avalon could really mitigate these laws being charged against people at abnormous rates for not having a place to use the restroom, or not having a place to sit and hang out and get resourced, or just exist safely without surveillance or state violence. I think this is an opportunity where you could have those values aligned of like not having borders, like wanting to appease people, wanting to bring people together like that. That is the opportunity to do that in this community center space. So I just want to also circle back to that, because I really want that to happen. And I know there's a lot of other folks in here who have been wanting that to happen and who have been organizing for that to happen. And I just want to continue to uplift that.
Yeah, and actually, since we're talking about the list now, I did want to note there's, I think, two things maybe Kat didn't list, maybe because they weren't on the list. One was we had discussed a bench.
Yes, that wasn't on there,
folks.
but yeah.
I think, I don't know, that was 2 meetings ago. So just if we could add that to the list. And then the second thing was I had raised at last meeting, essentially this question of, with a private developer, obviously these community benefits agreements you know, are a lot more expansive and, you know, set very specific terms as to units, et cetera. Here, some of those things are already built in based on the funding sources, based on the nature of Avalon. But I was curious, and I forget who had said this, but in what ways can we, you know, put into writing that, you know, and I can't think of a better word for it, but, you know, in the sense that, you know, what happens, or what can we do to prevent, you know, Avalon, say, from backsliding? Not that I think it's going to happen, but is there a way to articulate in writing kind of the principles and values that you have articulated to us meeting after meeting? Because I think that's valuable. You know, not that I assume, you know, Avalon's going to go for profit tomorrow, but yeah.
I'll answer that in part, and this is not a complete answer to it, which is that's one of the reasons on that first sheet. I did put a little bit of information about some of the other sources who are watching what we're doing and making sure that we're doing what we promised to do. One of the reasons I'm saying that is, of the funding sources, the city of Ypsilanti, from a staffing point of view and from a financial point of view, is honestly less resourced than the State Housing Development Authority, than the private investor who we're getting who's giving us that $4 million in equity. That's because of all the inequitable history that Pat made reference to. The reason I tie that together is our commitment to providing those services is monitored by those funders, the state. They come in. It may not be what you're looking for. I don't want to claim that, you know, they're doing a detailed audit that would satisfy the oversight that I think you're speaking to. But those other funding sources are in fact monitoring us throughout that compliance period, that we are doing what we promised to do. So that's one piece of it.
Yeah, that
We
part.
can take a
yeah.
shot at figuring out.
Well, so that part
Uh,
makes sense in the sense that if you want to keep these funds from the state and the county, et cetera, you have to comply with kind of their rules. But I know that in previous discussions we've had, you know, you've talked about the various programs that Avalon does of its own volition. And so I guess for me, it was important to not necessarily lock them in some ironclad language, but to say that, you know, Avalon will continue to do those things at a certain level of generality. You know, and so I forget who had mentioned it, but, you know, something about, you know, a statement of principles or whatever. I forget what the term
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, we talked about
oh,
that the last time, just overall committing to our service values and the core values of Avalon as they're updated over time, such as our strategic plan, our theory of change, those update approximately every 5 years. But those are things as an agency that we make public and that we very much commit to in terms of what we provide to all of our community spaces.
So I mean, that's just maybe an idea to somehow incorporate that into the agreement. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Just correct me if I'm wrong. I think we've got 3 good things going here, maybe 4. Okay, 4 good things going here. I think let me write them down. Recommendations for city council, okay?
And also just for us to be able to take these to the lawyer, we need you guys to vote and recommend them.
Okay,
So
let
that's
me-
a piece of
We-
information.
and that has to
we're
happen
missing,
today,
Yes,
right?
And
Okay.
So we need to do that today, really.
Okay,
So that
So-
it can be drafted by our final meeting.
That's good information to know. Awesome. Okay.
so I'm gonna do my best here. I'm short on yours, all right?
It's okay.
So we are talking about affirmatively marketing the units to older adults, and by older adults, I mean 55 plus. See me looking at everybody, if possible.
And I think additionally, did we all, I mean,
So I do have a document, and I don't know if you guys want to work from it, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. It's something that Michael had sent over. And so it's some of the language that they had drafted of things that of ideas that we've taken from here. So they already have a few of these written down very nicely if you want it.
Okay, let me just throw out these
Yep.
ideas and make sure that we're all like
For sure. Yeah.
sort of in
yeah.
agreement on this, and then we can move to the next step. Affirmatively market and prioritize if possible. If I get the wording wrong, just correct me. I'm not in the know on this. Okay. So affirmatively market and prioritize to formerly or recently incarcerated people.
Through the Avalon program formally
Yeah,
encouraged.
55 plus and was the first thing you said, right? And then the previously incarcerated.
Here's what I said. Affirmatively market to older adults who are 55 plus.
Yes.
Okay. Affirmatively market and prioritize, if possible, to formerly or recently incarcerated people through the Avalon programs that currently exist and may more if they continue, if you get new ones. Okay. Lose pilot status for units whose income rises above, I'm going to say 60% AMI, since that's your,
That's the maximum for the program.
Yep.
and That's how most communities do it, but.
Yeah. okay, so lose
that makes
pilot
sense, yeah.
status for units whose income rises above 60% for the time period that comes above.
For a given year.
60%.
so
Well, yeah.
Usually it's for a given year.
Yeah. And then,
What's a pithy way to say what I've been saying? Also to, Avalon will commit itself to, continuing to implement its, I forgot, what was it called? The
Guiding principle.
guiding principles. Thank you. Through the length of the agreement or whatever.
And since we're going on motions, could Avalon commit to a public community space in that center for organizers, other agencies to utilize with public restroom access to be included as a benefit? Is that something that you could commit to?
So we are comfortable collaborating with partners to offer like programs that are available to the wider community in the space and the community space. To be determined in partnership with community what that looks like. The commitment of publicly opening the space or that public could come and go from that space without the on-site presence of, say, non-tenants to hold that responsibility is not something we want to commit to. In large part driven by our commitment to tenants and what tenants are asking for, want, and have repeatedly expressed elsewhere. It feels like we're committing them to something that they're not asking for. And that is challenging for us. So the idea that we could absolutely allow that space to be used by folks in the community is something we're completely open to, but to just have it be open 24/7 and folks can come and go feels really unfair to tenants.
And also that's not your role. Like that's not Avalon's role to be a 24/7 shelter. Like that's not at all what I'm asking for in this moment. It's mostly like, can you commit that you would be open? And it sounds like you are, to having community organizers or other agencies utilize that space for programming, services, etc. And also having the restrooms be utilized during those times for the people who are using that space. My next thing is maybe an intention of, I'm really sorry if it ever came off as like it's a free for all. Everyone can just come in and out as they please. That's never what I had intended to come off as. It was mostly like, if you're a for sure no on 24/7, understandable. Okay. Cause their capacity and the staffing. What about public hours? Could you have Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 is public out? I'm just making stuff up. So you could have public hours in addition to the community organizers who use the space for their own programming. So I appreciate the commitment on the community organizing spaces for the center. And now I'm wondering about the public restroom or just public use, like during public hours, because I totally respect the tenant value of having their own home and wanting to have their own home and their own space. And there is a division between, you know, the community center side with the restroom and the tenant residences where they would be. And each of the residents have their own restrooms as well. So I definitely don't want anyone to feel like their home is being taken over, because I'm sure a lot of folks in the downtown area probably feel like that right now, who are unhoused. But I would like to just bring attention to some type of community benefit of a public hours or along those lines. I don't know if we can make a motion to commit to the community center for organizations or agencies if we come up with like a list of agency, like how does that process work? If there's a group of folks who would be interested in using that space, how would they request to use that space? And is there a denial process for that? Or
The only precedent we have is folks use our community centers elsewhere. And so, I mean, it's not a very technocratic process. It's pretty community oriented. And, you know, happy to think that through more. Don't have like an explicit response tonight on that.
okay.
You know, I think the piece about holding hours that are open to the public is complicated by resources and resource limitations around services funding, which at present is limited to serving the folks that live in that building. So if, for example, you know, an on-site support coordinator is in someone's apartment assisting them with something, there isn't going to be another person there who's then able to support someone coming in and out for another need. And I think we just want to be really thoughtful about what we can actually commit ourselves to from a resource standpoint. Sure. So, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of at least the concept I think Kat is offering is that, you know, essentially the organizations that come in are the ones providing the personnel and from their own organizations theoretically, but
Thanks, Hayden. That's what I was saying, yes. And I had another point to bring up to that, but I feel a little like tension a little bit around this topic, and I'm not entirely sure why. And it could be because I'm autistic and have really bad social cues issues, and that's entirely possible. But I genuinely don't understand like why there would be a hesitation in having a space that people could use when it's already a space that's there and not utilized. Like, I remember being a support coordinator in my first job out of grad school, and like I did notes in there, and that was a great time for me to catch up on my notes, but not a lot of people came by to stop by and to hang out or to chat. And so I felt like that space could be utilized for so many great organizing spaces and organizing moments. And there's just such a huge issue happening right now where like people are upset that the unhoused community members are defecating or, you know, on their property. And then there's this other one that's like, oh, well, I'm a property owner and my opinions matter more, and I'm the one harmed in this situation. But like, I feel like there's there's something that's missing here. And I don't know. I don't see the issues of having that space be staffed. Like you could have, I mean, I'm not asking for us to figure out the logistics and the operational components of how that could happen. I'm just asking if you could be committed to having that space be utilized for community organizations, to be able to like the rollover prevention clinic, to be able to utilize that space, or someone named some other places in front, like there's so many places and organizers who could use that space that don't have a brick and mortar. You have,
To that.
right, you have, but not necessarily when I say the public restrooms part, I'm not asking for Avalon to necessarily staff that public restrooms, but you could have like a community forum where people can volunteer to be present at y'all's community center, and they could be Avalon volunteers, and they could be the ones that are staffing the personnel for the restrooms or what have you. There's so many different options. And I feel like this is a really great space for us to talk through and brainstorm some of those things. And I'm not the end all be all. I don't know a lot of things. So this
Yeah.
is just be talking things through.
I mean, I think we're at least getting somewhere, right? So we have some agreement. And I think really now what we're trying to iron out is kind of the contours and the limits and the bounds of what that commitment will be in writing. And I think it's hard to articulate without at a high level of generality what it means for open hours and blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. So, I mean, I get the sensitivity, especially in light of current developments in the city. And so, I mean, I think there's definitely room for, agreement on like how we set those boundaries. Yeah. So. I
I'm
mean,
glad there's agreement. That's helpful. And I wasn't expecting, to be honest, anything less, because I know that Avalon plays a really pivotal role on these reentry committees, on these different committees in the Washtenaw Equity Partnership that just published their report. Like, y'all have such a presence in this area of work. And so I couldn't imagine y'all being opposed to the idea of having a space for people to safely hang out and get resource and collaborate on whatever issues are pressing or and important. So I do appreciate the commitment from y'all on that. And the nuances we can figure out hopefully at a different time.
So here's my next question. What's the next step? Do you want to read to us the language or send us the proposals that Avalon gave to you, or should we just take a general vote on 5
I thought we were at 4.
community space?
Well, the community space is, I
That was
think,
4.
Oh, the statement of,
Is 3. Oh, so are you counting the 55 plus and the previously incarcerated people as 2 different things?
Yes.
yeah.
I
because-
just I put it
because
as
they can't
one.
prioritize older adults,
Right.
but they can affirmatively market.
Right, yeah, but I
so-
have a verbally market and then I have the 2
Okay.
subgroups
Yeah.
Okay.
as one topic.
Although a formerly incarcerated, we think can also be prioritized in the CHIP process.
Got it. So then it makes it 2.
Right.
Catching on, sorry.
Yeah.
Faulty note taker over here. It's up to you guys.
Well,
I
yeah,
certainly can pass out what they've produced, but but it's your guys's. I don't want to do that unless you guys want that. So you guys tell me if what you prefer, or if you'd like to just vote on these 6.
Well, this is a provisional 6. 5? 6.
5. I thought it was 5.
5,
Um,
5.
yeah, okay.
I'm renumbering right now, so I don't make.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw another, one in
No.
there. Sorry. Well, I think it makes more sense to get as full of a list as we can.
Sure, yeah, no, I totally agree. I
Yeah.
just was joking because of the.
Yeah,
numbering.
yeah, you're good. So I know I'm usually the one who brings this one up. But so can you remind me the energy efficient construction part? Is that inclusive? Is that like required under your funding sources or?
Specific ones aren't required, but we
Okay.
choose and what I think would make sense if you're comfortable with it is our county funding, we've already made green commitments that are tied to something called the Enterprise Green Communities checklist. And then our MISTA loan is going to be tied to something called the National Green Building Standards, NGBS. And some language where we reaffirm that we will be building to those green standards.
Right.
Which ones and how they relate when we have different funders with slightly different takes on the green world. I hope the language can leave room for those funders to sort that out, but those green commitments will be there and they can be reaffirmed in this document.
Okay, cool. So, because I was just trying to think through which things are already kind of locked in more or less. And then, because I know this is my pet project, when it comes to renewable energy generation, I know in our previous discussions, you had discussed that in at least one other project, you know, it worked out miraculously that there was essentially leftover money to prior to do that for the property. And so I'm just trying to contemplate you know, a provision that says, you know, should there be money for it, let's go for it, or something along those lines. And of course, I bring that up obviously in the context of the Inflation Reduction Act, which would make the cost, you know, much more
It should.
much more inside.
Will say you're touching a pet peeve of
Sure.
mine, which is the state who, you know, the Inflation Reduction Act is the national funding, a lot of green innovation. It then gets allocated to the states, and the state of Michigan just announced their plans for implementing it. And they're hoping that by a year from now, we'll be able to apply for the funding. So if you look at my sources of income,
Yep.
you will not see Inflation Reduction Act
Right.
in there because it's maybe going
Yeah,
to
it's
be
a mystery.
available by the
Yeah.
time we build this.
Right, and
which
so-
is why we are
Yeah.
cautious about committing to very specific.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's, to my mind, I wasn't saying, you know, go to this exact pool of funding to do this or what have you, but yeah, okay. All right, well, that's my,
Was that 6
that's
and
my
7?
sixth option.
Oh,
Or
you-
oh, you want building and solar separate?
Well, that's, I was thinking, 'cause
Okay.
it's sort of two statement, right?
It is, you're right.
It's the green, like, they're committed to those green standards that they're
Right.
committed to. And then 7, if there's extra dollars,
Cool.
it would go towards, solar would be a priority.
Okay. Are you guys ready to vote?
A little bit. I have one more question on a potential benefit. There is a lot of conversation happening in the community about IPSI needing a 24/7 shelter space. And I know Jim mentioned a building for 300,000 or something dollars. And I know that one of the benefits is, you know, public infrastructure improvements, et cetera, public service enhancements, et cetera. So I'm wondering, since this is a housing nonprofit, is there a way we could somehow connect the two together, the 24/7 shelter need and Avalon Housing's development with the CBO, to somehow help bridge that? Because one, a lot of the folks who are unhoused are going to be Avalon clients, if not all. So that's one thing. And then also two, I know St. Luke's wrote a letter of support, and I mentioned this last time, and y'all are like, speak to them for yourself. We can't answer for them. And I understand that. And I still haven't done that because a lot of stuff has happened in the interim. But I just wanted to bring up this as a talking point of like, is there some kind of opportunity that lies there to do some form of collaborative work on that potentially?
There's nothing we can commit to in this process that I'm aware of. I mean,
Yeah, I did have kind of a, on this, sorry to interrupt, but I mean, I guess my question is, our mandate is kind of linked to this property, right? It's not beyond, because I like the idea that you have kind of an integrated kind of network or system for people to go from being unsheltered to, you know, affordable housing. But I don't know, is it, I mean, I'm asking because the city council is the one who gave us this mandate, so.
It is expired, but according
Well-
to the tier, well, we're using it right now. So
right.
it's not expired to us, but according to, you know, tier 1, number 1, one of the benefits is providing either on-site or off-site additional recreational activities, parks, green space, public service enhancements, or public infrastructure improvements for the city of Ypsilanti and its residents. And this can include public transportation services and infrastructure. So kind of want to push back a little bit on what you said, because it is a part of the benefits.
It's really a question. 'cause
Right.
some-
No, yeah, totally. Sorry. To answer it, I do think that they would have a part to play in this, and I don't want I'm not asking for y'all to commit per se, but just like more of like a conversation of how that could be possible.
I mean, just generally speaking, if there's a shelter that's proximate and people who are experiencing homelessness are moving from homelessness into supportive housing, there is a absolute interdependent relationship that exists as partners in this work. That's the case now with any folks, whether they're more institutional actors or less so, who are working with people experiencing homelessness, and that would absolutely be the case here. So that feels no different than what we are committed to already and would continue to do. I don't know if you're asking for something kind of above and beyond that. I think we would need to better understand what that is.
Yeah, me too.
I wonder if that maybe ties into the guiding principles idea, in the sense that it is part and parcel to what Avalon does now and should do for the length of this agreement, to do things like essentially create these flows and a system for people to go from, say, ad hoc shelters to actual place to live. So, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's exactly what you're contemplating, or if you're thinking something more brick and mortar.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. To your point, Hayden, earlier, yes. Yeah, Kat is correct. And if that's how it's structured in the tiers, then that could be something that's up for consideration.
Cool.
Thank you. Yeah, so I love that y'all are in potential favor of that and to exploring that option a little bit more. I honestly, I don't know what it could look like either. I've never built a shelter in my life. I have no idea what that is possible, what all entails in that. But I do want to do a little bit more research and look into it a little bit more to come back with more, I guess, comments on that, and also encourage the public to do the same, to fill me in where I am having some gaps. But I would like to have that as a potential discussion. But regarding the 5, 4,
I think we're at 7 now.
7, oh. All right, well,
And a blank 8. Oh, I'm at 5. I'm in
What?
trouble.
There was
It was
about,
the green standards. Got it. Solar.
Yep.
We're 6
I
and
made
7.
that.
and then the list we started with, the sheds,
Yes.
the tool, lending, shed, garden kind of combo that was on the original list. And then,
That sounds like less of a concern for us.
okay, I'm making sure that
I'll vote on
you
it.
still
Yeah, it's still, I mean, I think
saw those.
Yeah, so I think I would add essentially, and I don't know if we want to make it one umbrella category, but essentially community benefits that extend, to the rest of the property, beyond the community center, beyond the actual units. So we're talking about the sheds, a bench, depending on the availability of space for gardening or some other thing like that. I don't know if that captures everything. But
Yeah, I guess it depends on the scope of it all, because like I mentioned earlier, like the bathrooms in the parks could be maintained and operated. Same with like extending community gardens in various places. Additional recreational activities. They could sponsor some something going on. I don't know, like Heritage Fest. Something similar to that. Something for the community, maybe not the thing that's selling Confederate flags, but
yeah, real quickly, I noticed that we did, or someone also alerted me, we don't have public comment at the end of this meeting. Is there a way I could make a motion to add a public comment section, just so the folks in the audience can have a chance to respond to what we had just had robust conversation about?
That's typically how agendas are written for ad hoc and other committees and special meetings. So an agenda was already approved at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, well, now I know for next time to ask for that before
So
we.
we can,
Oh yeah, we also did do Robert's rules. We did not do that. We did We did say majority rules in this situation. I don't know where that ties in. Once again, I'm not a government person, but
Well, look, I will say I have no personal reservation about opening it up to public comment limited to 3 minutes, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we do have 30 minutes
I know.
left.
Yep.
So if we think we're at a point where we have a list that we want to send to the city attorney, I think we have the time for it.
We
We,
have to formally vote.
yeah, but I guess I guess procedurally, the question is, do we want to vote before or after the public comments? In case there's some idea that we like.
I would like to hear him. I'll motion to allow public comment.
I will second that if that's how we're doing things here.
Yeah, I think if we just follow the same rules that we
Yeah.
did at the beginning now, that's.
Yeah, as long as you're open to it, and then the next meeting next week, we'll just build it into the agenda.
Oh, great. Thank you.
So that it's already on there.
Thank you.
Still need some clarification.
Okay.
We're voting this week to make recommendations to city council. What are we meeting for next week?
So what we want to do is for you, the plan was for you all to kind of put forward the recommendations to have the CBO or agreement drafted, and then you'd have another opportunity to review it next week before it would go on the council
So
agenda.
this is,
Okay.
That was,
Yeah, this
that
is
was
just
the
like-
reason for the,
Okay.
yeah,
This is like our first draft,
so
essentially.
that you see it, actually see it and can make changes
to
before.
the physical contract.
Correct, 100%. Yep.
Okay, so now you need to vote on that motion that was made and supported.
I think.
All in favor for listening to the public
Aye.
for aye. All right.
Yes, that motion passed. But are they able to do usually it's at the very end of the meeting.
Oh, are we breaking the rules even more? Oh,
I would rather hear from him.
If you
before we
want to
vote.
hear, if that's the choice of the committee and you want to hear first before you vote,
well, I will admit this.
then we can go that route.
I'll admit this is the first meeting that there've been people physically in the room, so I think it's extremely important. So,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We can do that if the committee so chooses, and then come back to the items that you had identified
Thanks,
We're leaving
Evan.
it at those 7.
for now, and it can always be,
That can change.
yeah, correct,
Okay, great.
Okay.
correct. Okay, so if you, Des, go ahead. Yep, it's time to public comment. You'll have 3 minutes to address the group, and we'll go just by order of hands. So proceed.
Thank you. I didn't know I was going to get another chance. Hello, everyone. It's my first time here for this meeting. Desiree Simmons, Ward 3. Just listening to some of the things that y'all talked about, I just had a couple of questions or thoughts. One was, I know that y'all talked about this marketing the IPSI thing. I was just wondering whether it's a possibility for, marketing, having early, like if there's a time delayed, like promotions that can happen here. I know one of the things that came out of the Fair Housing Center for another project was because the city of Ypsilanti actually has a lot of the demographics that folks are trying to actually get into housing, that it worked out for IPSI to kind of have some of that preference. So that's just, I was just wanting to put that forward. The other thing is, I know that a lot of the conversation around the public space and the organizations, I don't know if y'all already had talked about ways that there could be like specific tenant decision-making and that they could then be holding that community room space. And then within that, it could be listing like possibilities, like saying whether there's public, bathroom hours, whether there's, what the process would be, but that could be something that the tenant decision-making group could hold. So that was that. And then the other thing, this is, I don't know, this is a little like off, whatever. But Kat, when you were mentioning, you kind of listed a few different laws like loitering and
Trespassing.
trespass, other things.
Yeah.
So a thought that I had is whether you could add kind of a list of ordinances that you would then want city council to then consider repealing
Mm.
overall that would impact, the folks living in this space, as well as people that might visit them and or that might use that public space or things of that sort. Because then you could like maybe address that, and then council has to go through whatever that decision making is for those things, but maybe this committee could kind of draft and have looking at what our ordinances are and make some proposals. So just wanted to share that idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Brian? That's okay.
Hello again. You all are doing amazingly well. Like this just makes me very happy. Yeah, seeing this in action, I'm just like, this is how it was supposed to look. So I'm just, yeah, okay. So like part of the dream of the CBO as it was being created was that because the sort of political scene around here can be powerful in ways that developers got pushed, like, we people were pushing back against developers a lot in 2017 and onward, and probably before too. And part of the dream of the CBO, I think, was that what's great about it is that once an agreement is reached, the developer can feel as though they don't have to worry so much about pushback from the community because the creation was a community collaborative effort. In that vein, I would like to encourage some serious creativity and imagination from the part of everyone. And I think I will try to help with this in the next week as well. But in terms of how Avalon's already existing sort of strengths can be leveraged in a way toward helping an offsite shelter at, in a sort of win-win sort of way where it's like you all already have some really strong aspects of your organization and that I think could be extremely helpful. And so like, I don't think we need to ask for like $1 bazillion worth of kickback, like staffing or anything, but staffing is one place I would look to at first. But I think the middle of the Venn diagram here is like, what do you already have in place that could be really, really helpful in that potential new spot? Yeah, great work, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Hi all. I just wanted to follow up on what Brian was saying and mention that there have been conversations in the community about how we could possibly go about building a community-run shelter, and it seems like a gargantuan task. And as I've mentioned before, I can't imagine you all have like a ton of resources just to throw at the problem, as a lot of organizations might have, but I would love to see like an actual outreach, like a move towards conversations with the that could partner with the community that's already having these conversations, so that it's not like we come up here and we're like, well, give us a shelter. And then it's not like you all sit around and you're like, well, when a shelter comes up, we'll partner with them. Like, how can we actually make it come to fruition together? Because as Brian was saying, you all have some strengths and so do we. And we desperately need each other for such a dream to actually happen. And such a basic dream it is, just like emergency housing, right? So some suggestions might be public meetings, inviting community organizers to have these conversations, and community organizers could also reach out as well. But and then just thinking about just how Brian said, what kind of resources not only can you not do, because it's super valid to have boundaries, but also what can you do? What is available to offer in infrastructure or in labor, etc. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to stress that there is a serious level of commitment in this community towards, emergency shelter or decommodified spaces. I should have given more context with YGS. It was at Riverside Art Center. And they had an area that was kind of sequestered from the rest of the building, and we had access to it from 5 to 9, similar to what Kat was saying. It wasn't like 24 hours or anything like that, but it was completely volunteer run. We brought the food, we cleaned the space, we had de-escalation skills, and the only reason it shut down wasn't because of a capacity thing, it was because of COVID. And so a lot of those same people are doing like the daytime shelter that runs in the winter here. So there is like a serious level of commitment and expertise that if something could happen with Avalon of, getting the property or anything like that, there would not at all be a lack of support. Or even if this community spaces, we can use that, there will always be like a solid base of people willing to run it. So,
I missed your two names.
oh, I'm Raven.
Even,
Yes.
thanks. Edna? Is it-
Amber?
So again, yeah, I just want to say that the committee's doing really well. So good job. That's the whole point. It's holding the feet to the fire, even if it's a friendly face and supposedly affordable housing. So I do want to speak to that, the affordable part. I do think what you brought up, Jason, was really astute. Countywide AMI levels do not support affordability in the city of Ypsilanti. So I do think one of the things you could, like tangible benefits you could do, is negotiate to lower those AMI levels or have more units at the 40%, 50%. Every single CBA process this far, which has been 2, but this will be the 3rd one, has had the developers lower more units into the 40 and 50 AMI zones, and that would be closer to what would meet affordability standards in Ypsilanti. Not perfect, but better. I do think there is a responsibility of Avalon as a Ann Arbor agency is to not offset the issues of Ann Arbor to Ypsilanti. And one of the ways that could happen is not prioritizing Ypsi residents for this space. In the CBA agreement that I was a part of, we did consult with Fair Housing Center, and they did tell us that the demographic information of Ypsilanti means that we can prioritize city residents based on our demographics. They said, hire a demographer to write a letter that says that it's okay, and then you can do that. And so we have a 6-month prioritization window for Dorsey Estates, which is not built yet, but when it is built, it will prioritize Ypsi residents for 6 months. So that is something to consider. And I think this is going generally well. I really do support everything else that everyone said so far, especially about the community space. You want to get a really strong commitment from these folks to have that space be open. And I just want to say, if you don't get the benefits that you want from Avalon, you could recommend to council to not forward the project altogether. That is the option of this committee. So just want to say you should get everything that you want. That's a part of the process. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else tonight like to speak? Is there anyone on Zoom, Katie?
Well, I want to say thank you for even being here, because the last few meetings were terribly lonely. So I think
Hang on, is there
Yeah.
anybody else on Zoom that
Oh.
would like to speak for public comment? Please raise your hand.
I have a bunch of questions.
Go ahead, Hayden.
So, and I mean, you can also go, but so I know we had previously discussed, this was maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago, what Avalon does in terms of tenant decision making, and I can't recall now what you all had said. Because I think it does kind of potentially tie into concerns surrounding community space, you know, it's like if the tenants want it, well, that kind of changes the calculus a bit. So I don't know if you could just jog my memory as to how, like, generally the tenant decision making is done with Avalon. I just don't recall.
So we don't have a formal tenant council in a formal sense. What we have is a resident council. They're called VOGL. It stands for Voices of Community Advocates and Leaders. Those folks go through, they're making a commitment both to the organization, the community at large, and then they're going through a curriculum in which they learn things like Robert's Rules of Order, how to run a meeting. And they are who we go to for decision-making organizationally. The issue there is there's not always representation on that body from all properties. So in a situation where, I can think of an example where there was decisions being made about who could come and go out of a building, and that was absolutely a tenant-driven decision that took place through community meetings. And they decided that they wanted doors locked and they wanted alarms on doors. That was a decision that community made. So we would absolutely need to, and it would be foundational for us to not be making these decisions without tenants saying, yes, we want that. And here's how that's okay with us. I think the then sort of added layer of, okay, and then how do we resource that and do that in partnership with community could also be something that they could be contributing to and in discussion around.
That committee, is that from individual properties or does it decide for all of Avalon?
Yeah, so it's basically like, we're gonna go to them for larger sort of organizational decisions. As you are tenants and you are bringing that, you are an expert by experience as a result of that. And so that's, it's not property specific decision-making that gets made with VOGL. Yeah.
To speak to that, I did want to uplift Des. Thanks for bringing that up again during public comment. I did bring up that part at another meeting. I believe it was the last one, to have a potential tenant advisory for this property to say, yeah, we can approve this person using this space, or no, we don't. I think that would be great for a conversation of if they want to have public restroom hours, sure. But I think that having a commitment with the community space being used for organizations, agencies, pop-ins, and the bathrooms that's a really great start in this process. I do think that having a benefit, I like the idea. I appreciate the idea of having like non-property specific tenant councils, but I'm also like curious if there's like any things that can come of that I'm just thinking, like, if someone in this specific area feels a certain way about this property and how that could be controlling to the person over here in this property. And I also, you mentioned that some tenants wanted alarms and locked doors at all times. And a lot of the folks who are in these that we're talking about as tenants, as Avalon tenants, have some type of trauma history, whether it be through interpersonal violence of a family member or generational trauma of systemic failure, like you name it, there's trauma there. And so it's not surprising to me that individuals would want to lock their doors or put alarms up, because having no safety at all, wondering where you're going to sleep at night, and using a certain stimulant drug to help you stay up at all hours of the day so you don't get robbed at night, or vice versa, you're in chronic pain and you take opiates to not feel that anymore. I'm thinking, like, how is this a way to build some kind of like conversation or community of like, I just don't want there to be this narrative of like, well, I'm not a bad one, or I'm a good one. I'm a good unhoused. Like, I am not going to be scared of my community member. I don't know if I'm making any sense. I just don't like this potential narrative of like, well, our tenants have decided to have this, but are also living off of their own lived experience and trauma history, and how that could be potentially devastating towards like future properties who maybe don't have the same stipulations or conditions going on in the, am I making any sense here? I'm word vomiting at this point, but I just wanted to bring that up because I don't I just know that some community members there's like good cops, bad cops, good teachers, bad, and I don't like that narrative being played around, and I don't want to invalidate people's perceived safety either, because that's obviously very important as well. So is there like a middle ground here, I guess, is maybe what I'm trying to ask.
I mean, I think fundamentally, like so different communities do have different sort of norms, ways of being, and it is the case that there are properties where it's a much more open building culture, and there are other properties where that's less so the case, and it's never. I mean, we as an organization are going to be responsive to the outlier. We are responsive to generally the majority. So when we hold community meetings and we bring certain decision making forward in partnership with tenants, generally it's the majority that's kind of weighing in on something like that. I mentioned that example, probably shouldn't have, because it's a real outlier. It's frankly, I mean, and we could talk more.
It's good to know that it is
All of that said, I think it's also been, there are other places where when you have more density, which we won't have here. So I just want to acknowledge, like, how much tenant participation will we see in those spaces and those community meetings to be determined, right? But where we have more density and there's just a lot more people kind of coming and going, we have been more successful at having more formal resident council organized efforts that were consistent, where people were really, I think, owning a lot more of the decision making.
Okay.
There's just a higher volume of participation.
Okay.
So I have two more quick questions. I know that we at least got we'll say provisional green light as to certain forms of marketing. I think one comment that was raised, and I don't know if maybe you already answered this and I just didn't remember, is marketing to Ypsi residents prohibited? Because it sounded like the prioritization might have been problematic under federal regulations, but less so from a marketing standpoint.
I think we have to learn more.
Okay.
Because,
Yeah.
as was pointed out, there's like the overarching federal
Yes.
fair housing laws. That's not what I was actually referring to. I was literally referring to the regulations that come with money, and they can be
Right.
more restrictive than the fair housing laws. So I think we hear pretty clearly that there's a goal here that this housing benefit this community by providing truly affordable housing to the lowest income residents. And part of that has to do with who finds out about it and who has access to the wait lists. And we will report back to staff what we learned.
Can I ask a clarifying question? In regard to the geographic prioritization and the desire around that, when we're talking about folks experiencing homelessness, are you also asking that their zip code of last resort be Ypsilanti? Or is there an openness if we were to move it? I mean, I think I'm struggling with that. So I just want to acknowledge folks are homeless.
I definitely understand the kind of the logistical problems in saying, like, this person has to be, or like, we're going to market to specifically people who quote unquote live in Ypsilanti when we're talking about people who are unhoused. So like, I understand that that's an inherent issue. I was more curious about like what's permitted and what's not. Because then, because like that will tell us the realms of possibility. So that was kind of the nature of my question, given the kind of the public concern over it. Yeah, I didn't. Okay, it's gone. I had another thought, but it's gone. Oh, I did have a second question. When it comes to the AMI thresholds and the number of units, how was I'm sure you told us way back at the beginning how those numbers were set, how the allocation of number of units was set. Could you just refresh my memory?
Yeah, some of it had to do with being competitive to try to get this money, because we were competing against other affordable housing projects.
Okay.
And we lowered AMI in order to do that. Because we are not charging the maximum rents for given AMIs. They are, they're looked at by our investors and they're looked at by NISTA. We've already gotten some funding based on these commitments, so we have to understand the implications of that, but, I don't want to predetermine the discussion about that.
Right. How were those broken down though? Was it 9 at 50%, 5 at 40%, 8 for vouchers?
No, it's 9 at 50%. Yeah, but the 8 vouchers, it doesn't add
Oh,
up that way. The 8 vouchers are different. It's 9 at 50%, 4 at 40% is I'm trying. to-
5 at
5
5
at
at 40, 9
Fine.
at 50.
And then subtract 22 from that. The rest are at 60. And separately from that income commitment, 8 of those units, probably from the 50% units, will have vouchers on them.
Oh,
And those vouchers will go to people whose incomes are below 30%.
Right. Oh, yeah, yeah, I see the email where you said
It's-
that. Yeah, okay.
okay, so it's 8 at 60%, where 8 is at 120% of Ypsilanti's AMI, but 60% of the counties.
Can you repeat that?
The way it broke down with the AMI for the county, it was about $80,000. And for the city, it's 40,000.
Yeah.
So if it's 60% of the county, that's 120% of here.
I'm just gonna take your word on that one.
Well, and I mean, I at least see in this email where you kind of break this down that it's 60% or below
Yeah.
that.
So, I mean, you've been real clear in talking with us that you sort of want to know what the absolute commitments are. So this is not an atypical mix for Avalon's commitments in all of our properties across our whole housing stock that we have. Many of our units at 60%, many of our units at 50%, and a smaller grouping below. And then we have these vouchers that only go to people at 30% or below. And so that, as a practical matter, overrides this. In reality, the actual median income or average income for Avalon households has been just over $11,000. Maybe it's crept up to $12,000 in recent years. Regardless of what the 60%, 50% is. And that, I think our average AMI household has been between, okay,
find
if you can find it.
I hear you, but I can't predict 50 years out.
You can't predict 50 years out, but I guess what I want to say is there are different reasons for some of these different numbers. And I understand that you're looking for language that ties our hands and is enforceable. And I don't dispute the importance of that. These are the commitments we've made for 30 some years now, 30 years now. The actual average median income for our households is probably somewhere around 15 to 20% AMI.
Yeah.
Now,
The vast majority of our folks are below 30% AMI. Over 50% of the over 800 folks that we serve are open on less than $800 a month. For what it's, even in units that are at these same AMI commitments.
Yeah, because the idea, I think I guess what you're saying, I mean, I don't really know how it works, but the idea is like, that's the maximum amount you can make. And if you make below, you still can get into the 60% AMI unit theoretically, if it's available.
You'll just be very housing cost burdened.
well, no,
Unless it's a voucher.
no, yes, the voucher completely changes the game, but I think we're all setting aside those voucher units. Those come from the chip list. They will be folks who have no more than 30% AMI income, and most of them will be closer to 0 than to 30%. But the other units, we are setting our rents right now at $750 a month, which is about equivalent to a 35% AMI affordability level. Even though our commitments are at 40%, 50%, and 60%. I could go into how tax credits work and why we do that, and it would honestly make you not like the way we fund affordable housing in this country. But it is the only way we can fund affordable housing in this country. Or I shouldn't say general. It's the only way Avalon can make this happen. I think there needs to be a balance between what I hear you saying, which is put commitments in place that are enforceable and meaningful. And there's a reason we can't say, okay, everybody will be at 35% AMI or below. Even though that's what our rents suggest the affordability would be at.
Yeah, my concern is like with that is yeah, you're just going off of how you've been like, yeah, I would like that affirming language of like, yeah, we're not gonna boost up the rents right after we get there. At least $750 that first year, but now we're up to $1,300 because we said we could.
And so MISTA doesn't allow us to raise the rents more than 5% a year.
Okay.
That may not be the goal, but there are, that's sort of why I tried to point.
Can the CBO prevent you from raising rates more than 5%?
I don't know whether having that, the CBO, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not answering whether from the point of view of the CBO it can. I imagine the answer is yes. I'm responding to whether other funders will, how they will react to that. I don't know.
Okay.
Just really quick too, but a lot of this project isn't mostly vouchers, right? It's only 8 will be vouchers and then 14 will be AMI. So is there a way we could put in writing to get the $750 rent threshold for the duration of the 50 years?
I mean, if you go to the, I'm not gonna call it up. Because our expenses go up, our rents go up too over time. We project them going up at 2% a year. And that, I believe, is what Avalon, except for vouchered units, we've only raised our rents at 2% a year for 30 years.
Are there any years where you don't raise it? Is it always 2% or are there years you don't raise it?
I think we've always raised.
Okay.
Well, we have surpassed Yvonne's 2 hours.
I know, I was about to say that, Yvonne. Well, I think we're going back to wanting to put a motion to get some of these benefits on paper so we can review them at the next meeting. So do we want to vote on those?
Yeah, so can you, I hate to, can you just repeat them for us?
I can try.
Or should we do one at a time? Like what's the,
I mean, unless there are unless anyone objects to doing them all at once, I would
Okay.
propose it, but
okay, then let's do that.
I mean, insofar, if there's a deal breaker, if there's an objection, we won't do it that way.
Okay,
So affirmatively market to the 55 plus age group. Prioritize and affirmatively market previously incarcerated people. That Avalon would lose their pilot status for units above 60% for a given year. What I wrote is the note.
If
might not
the
be right.
tenant's income goes above 60%
Right.
AMI, Avalon loses the pilot status for that unit for that year.
For the unit, right.
instead of loses, is there a way it could go somewhere? I don't know how that works, like else or how?
In Ann Arbor, at least, and in other communities, what it does is they go back. They're maintaining what they think the taxable value of the property should be otherwise. And they can assess us that value. They can make us pay full taxes on one unit.
Okay. And then wherever that lands in the city's treasury, that's up to the city. Okay.
Oh, well, I don't, okay.
Because essentially the idea is that they would assess the tax instead of letting it go.
Right.
And
it.
then say, pay up sucker.
Or we'd say it nicer than that.
Oh, well,
And number 4 is that Avalon would commit itself to continuing to use its guiding principles throughout the entire 50-year pilot. 5 is that they would collaborate with partners to use for use of the community space and community programming, which they actually have that bullet written much nicer than what I just said to you guys. But yes, that concept. And then 6 is that they would use the green standards, and 7 is if there's extra money, once as they're building the project, then solar would be the priority if there's extra.
well, and if we need to change the language to be more generic, it's like renewable energy generation.
Renewable energy.
If,
Yeah.
I don't think geothermal is cheaper than solar,
Yeah, I
but
don't think so either, but,
Not there.
and that's what I've got.
All right. I make a motion to approve all of those.
oh, yeah, well, was there anything else to add, I guess, before we?
I'm sure I'll have some more to add potentially next time. But right now I think it's okay to just go with those right now.
Okay.
So you made a motion, Evan?
I make a motion that we approve all of those as potential community benefits.
Seconded.
All in favor?
All in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed to that?
So essentially, the next steps is you hand this to the city attorney.
So
and
Katie's
say,
gonna have them, yep,
get ready.
draft
Yeah.
the agreement, yep. And then what we'll do is have that agreement prior to your meeting next Wednesday. So that you can have it and review it and then propose changes to it at that meeting before it gets passed along for council to review.
And when is can you just remind everyone when that council meeting?
It would be the week
19th?
following, so the 19th.
Yeah, okay.
So the Tuesday after your meeting next week.
Don't ask me how I remembered that.
Oh, yeah, we need a motion to.
Oh, yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded?
Seconded.
In-
Aye.
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 Right.
And we'll have, Katie's gonna put public comment on the agenda next time.
Oh, thank you,
Both ends
Katie.
of it. So it'll
Well,
just
and especially for the last one.
It'll just be
I
factored
never
into it.
needed it. We never
We don't have
needed
to.
it.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yes.
So it'll just be on there.
We've never had public comments.
right, exactly.
Dude, literally,
Bad math.
I typed up.
I
Or- I don't wanna-
I did that math for like their total value, not their
I have no idea. What
Oh, yeah, that's.
Sorry, what did you say?
That's a world of.
color.
Just for that one.
You feel like the rest
Don't
of
want to
them
understand it. Well,
I do. Yeah, number 3, I really feel like is a little, they have some good language for the other ones.
But I would love you down. Yeah, I would love you.
Cause they have like they already have really good language for green standards and they have programming and they have
Yeah, you have to, let's use.
that's everything else. But that one I don't have. Good. That'd be great. I mean, I understand the principle of it.
I wrote down Avalon will use. A particular unit, if the tenant in that unit has. a-
otherwise,
higher
time is nothing.
And yeah, and frankly, I mean.
Or the-
I just.
Right,
Yeah.
that unit for that year.
For that year,
Wasn't it?
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that.
I don't know, how are we determining? The year, is it the lease agreement or is it the calendar year?
Right.
I guess we have to figure that out.
I communicated with some.
So you'll send it,
my
Andrew, and
call.